It is kind of pathetic. You're right. I mean, at its base, like this idea, and I'm sure that at some point the listeners are going, "What the hell's wrong with you? You get yourself back into shape. What the fuck are you doing?" But yet I think certain times of year and certain settings really all form together to create this perfect storm of kind of grabbing you by the wrist and dragging you, sometimes begrudgingly, down memory lane.
Hey, everybody, and a very festive welcome to Das Audiophiles. Weihnachten. My name is John. His name is Andy.
It is.
I stand still stepping on the shady streets, and I watch that man to a stranger. You think you only know me when you turn on the light. Now the room is lit with danger. More of that later. But first, in our festive week of vaguely, sometimes, related Christmas songs, Andy's got one for us to listen to. What have you got for us today, Andy?
Well, one that I hope is not too vague, but it is by a band that has now appeared twice on the channel, I think, maybe two or three times. Okkervil River, and the track by them is called "Listening to Otis Redding at Home During Christmas."
Every family does it. There's that
Everybody
point,
is, yes.
usually on Boxing Day, when it's gather around and and listen to Otis sings the blues. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, please go off, give this thing a spin, and let me know what you've made of it.
Home is where beds are made and butter is added to toast. On a cold afternoon, you can float room to room like a ghost. Take the creche out and argue about who gets to set up the kings. And I know that it's home because that's where the stereo sings.
yeah, it's really nice beginning. It's nice acoustic guitar. I think I detected a couple of notes of some sort of like keyboard thing, really gentle, but it almost sounded like the start of a early Simon and Garfunkel song. You could imagine two guys, Art and Paul, just like kicking in there. It had that sort of built-in poignancy to it with the tone straight away. And then he starts singing. He's got a nice, gentle voice, but it's got sort of character to it. Um, and it's a pretty picture of home and, lots of toast and floating from room to room. He mentions a creche and about arguing about setting up the king. So I presume that's not a chessboard. It must be referring to a nativity scene. Creche in the UK and Europe, because it is a French word, means nursery care for preschool children. Think of the more developed countries, not the UK. Some companies that offer creches as part of the package to the employees. Yeah, so that's creche. But yeah, it sounds really pretty, and sort of kind of homely as well. But getting little starting bits of percussion it feels like it's half-hearted. There was like a hint of like work on a symbol or something, but yeah.
I've got dreams to remember.
So that is the Otis Redding song that he referenced in the title. I've got dreams to remember. A wonderful slow burner from Otis. And the drums kicked in here properly. But again, it's kind of a bit sort of lackluster.
But not even home will be with you forever. It's Christmas time and the plane flies me over white hills to a town in a dream where the sky it is frozen and still, and a room that's not mine but it's just like I left it before. The wax from the candles all dusty and locks on the door.
Not sure about this bit, but it seems to me, so he mentions about a plane flying over white hills, Christmas time, frozen sky, room that's not his own, but like his own. It feels like escapism into maybe in the past or into something that isn't reality. I don't know. It definitely hints at escaping something.
Where I held you so tenderly, and where in summer I opened your letter to me. Standing where we kneeled, and a miracle mile now borders it. But if I turn my face to the field, I don't even notice it for a second.
Yeah. So within the space of a very short period, we've gone from this sort of wistful, quite homely, almost warm feeling, remembrance maybe, introduction of those strings. I was just thinking it suddenly feels a little bit despondent. And I'm not, he said something about opening the letter in summer. So I'm thinking of these things back in time, Christmas time, summer. Yeah. And then this cello kicks in and it's just really sad.
I don't even notice it for a second.
think he said, I'm just going to rewind it again a little bit here. I think he said something about, I imagine we're more than friends, and if we stayed in this town. And so I think this is a escape from reality. Perhaps that letter from the summer was them breaking up, or even a non-starter. It's just like, and the other person's moved on somewhere else.
Scenery where winter's scenery ends.
Cello's so pretty.
And I hear that song sometimes, imagine us much more than friends. Like if we stayed in this town, bought the first house that went up on sale. And how each Christmas time would bring in-laws and snow days and holiday mail. Your dad says you're living in Georgia since last September. Yeah, well, I got dreams to remember. I got dreams to remember. I got dreams to come back to New Hampshire, we'll stay there forever.
Yeah, that was super interesting. To that, especially that last verse, it's almost like a false narrative, isn't it? And then it was talking about settling down and Christmas and in-laws and all this sort of stuff. There was this fantasy, and then it says, I think it's your father says that you've been living in Georgia, and it's kind of like reality hits, and you get this sort of rippling effect from the strings. It's almost like someone's dropped a pebble into his, like, his dream world, and it's rippling away. And he goes, "Yeah, well, I got dreams to remember," and he retreats back into fantasy, and it swells, and and he's still building this fantasy world around him, as it were. And then it sort of like just cracks for a bit, and it says, "Oh, Sarah, come back to New Hampshire." So he may have his dreams, but he still wants the reality. Yeah, it's really cool song. I enjoyed it a lot. We have to find out a bit more about what's going on here. So let's go back and chop it up with Andy and find out.
All right, so you are back from giving this thing a go. What are your thoughts, John?
Okay, yeah, I think this is the third time I've listened to this band.
Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, it starts off with a really simple but beautiful acoustic guitar, leads us into the song. And then I said in the reaction actually that it's something about the tone or whatever. It could easily be an early Simon and Garfunkel song. It's just got that same sort of feel about it, just as at the start. And you could imagine the two of them just chirping in.
Yeah.
But your man starts singing, and yeah, he does have this lovely voice that has a bit of character and a bit of depth to it as well. First couple of lines paint a lovely sort of homely picture, home about where beds are made and butter put on toast or something. Just sort of warm and fuzzy, isn't it? He also talks about a creche and setting up the Kings. I guess this is a nativity scene rather than a chessboard. Um, Creche in the UK and in Europe, because it is a French word, means a nursery for preschool children, um, often for working parents. And in more enlightened countries than the UK, these are sometimes provided by the companies that the said parents work for. Um, Scandinavian, really. They're much more
That
advanced in the
sounds
way that
about
they look after
right.
their kids. Yes. So we've got this scene here, and then he references the Otis Redding song in the title, I've Got Dreams to Remember, which I do know. It's a classic slow burner from Otis. As he starts singing this line, the drum kicks in. Well, I say kicks, more like limps in. Um, Even the sort of hits on the cymbal sound sort of a bit tired and exhausted. I mean, it's perfect, it's great. There's a spooky organ sound that sort of hovers about for a couple of lines, but then is chased away by the return of the vocals with the next verse. So we get a really pretty description of the flight of a plane over white hills into a town in a dream with a frozen sky. And I think it struck me that this was perhaps an expression of escapism, well, wishing to escape from reality, perhaps. It's quite a vivid picture, though. So it's really struck me at the time when listening to this. And then there's a line at the end of this after he's spoken about holding you, the person, tenderly, where he says, "In summer, I opened your letter to me." So this obviously sounds significant, but I didn't quite grasp it at the time. But we have these difference between the start of the verse. It says it's Christmas, and then he's saying in the summer, I opened the letter to you. So put a pin in that for now. We get a very beautiful violin which joins in, and I said over the space of like 2 or 3 bars, suddenly it goes from this kind of wistful, nostalgic to an air of despondency that's really suddenly is all around. And I didn't even notice it creeping up. Just as he sings the lines, I didn't even notice it, which I thought was quite a nice synchronization there. We then go into a really, really beautiful sort of instrumental section with they ratchet it up from this lovely violin to cello, probably the saddest of all instruments in terms of a mournful sound. It sounds like a soul keening with agony sometimes. And it's really, and the delicately picked guitar sounds even more beautiful in contrast to the mournful cello. It is really lovely, and thankfully it continues on, well, at least the cello does, into the next verse. And I'm catching the key words. He says, I imagine us much more than friends. So then it sort of clicks in that this is a kind of what if song. And he is imagining the previous situation didn't change. He says about their staying in their hometown and settling down and living that imagined picture, postcard life, idealized but not real. Now, I'm still unsure whether they actually did have a relationship or whether they were just friends. But this letter from the summer is obviously some note or indication of change, whether it's a splitting of relationship or just a parting of the ways of their friendship, as he mentions later on. But it's definitely what he's talking about now is this fantasy stroke idealized, image in his head. And reality kicks in when he says, your dad says you're living in Georgia since last September, I think it is. So clearly they're not having Christmas together or in-laws or anything like that. And at this point, we get these flickered strings, and they seem to almost represent ripples as this sort of pebble of reality is dropped into his fantasy. And he responds kind of like defiant, whatever. And then more Otis, well, yeah, I've got dreams to remember, sort of like, well, I've got this anyway in my head to fall back on. Um, Well, it's it's true, but really quite sad as well. And the music swells and it really sort of builds, and we got this one last hurrah against reality. Um, he's almost taken up residency in this fiction, in this dreamlike. Um, and then he just says, "Oh, Sarah, come back to New Hampshire," which is it's truly pathetic in the sort of real meaning of the word. It's like he hasn't even got the strength to stay in his fantasy world, and he just relents at the end. So yeah, and I guess the sort of the holiday season side of it is this idea of family and connections and whatever, that makes it all more poignant for him. So yeah, I really enjoyed this song. I thought it was a great narrative for the way the song built through, and musically it was really beautiful as well, pretty. So yeah, it's a good shout.
I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, Will Sheff has a way of, in a very Simon and Garfunkel way, a really excellent way of spinning this folksy narrative over top of similarly folksy kind of sounding music. Um, and yeah, they're wonderful. And I'm glad we could get another one of their tracks on the channel. Now, as mentioned, obviously we've covered tracks by these guys before, so I'm going to avoid recapping much of the biographical information as we often do when we get to this point in a band's oeuvre or their coverage on this channel. But I will be creating a playlist devoted to our Okkervil River episodes. So if you're interested, please go back and give those episodes a watch for that information and the experience of hearing some really good music. This track, listening to Otis Redding at home during Christmas, features on the band's debut studio album, Don't Fall in Love with Everyone You See, one that we have yet to feature on the channel until now. So it's another reason I'm glad we could knock it out. Listening to Otis Redding at home during Christmas is the penultimate track on the album. And given its subject matter, the time of year, and the fact that, as mentioned, we've yet to feature their debut album on the channel, I thought it was a really perfect selection for our weekly holiday themed tunes. Um, Released on January 22nd, 2002, on the label Jaguar, the album features an array of instruments including violin, pedal steel, mellotron, banjo, string, and horn sections. The lineup of the band on this album include Jonathan Myberg, bass, accordion, tambourine, Wurlitzer, Will Sheff, vocals, guitar, mellotron, harmonica, organ, Zachary Thomas, mandolin, electric bass, vocals, string bass, Seth Warren, drums, vocals, spoons, and Tarraget. While guest musicians on the album included Alex Arcone, saxophone, Ethan Azarian, banjo, Brian Beatty, organ, and Hammond organ, Scott Blesner, violin, Michael Crow, trumpet, Peter Elliott, trumpet, Daniel Johnston, vocals, Channing Lewis, saxophone, Gary Newcomb, pedal steel, Ashley Rath, violin, June Ray, violin, both of whom feature on this track, Alice Spencer, vocals, and Brian Standifer, cello, who also featured on this track. So over at Stereo Gum, they devoted an article to the band's entire discography and wrote of this album something of a thesis statement for Okkervil River. Their label or their debut LP, Don't Fall in Love with Everyone You See, established the band's template that would be broadened with each successive release. The canny way the mandolins pluck so unobtrusively beneath Sheff's bleeding vocals, and the band's innate knack for crafting a resplendent melody, all undergirded by a steady bass and drum heartbeat. David Dye of NPR wrote of the band and their debut studio album, with a sound that combines folk, indie rock, pop, and orchestral elements, Okkervil River crafts a groundbreaking, original, and intensely emotional sound, making the Austin band a cultishly beloved up-and-comer after a small handful of self-released recordings. The band signed a label deal in in time to release 2002's Don't Fall in Love with Everyone You See, which drew praise for its delicate songwriting and thoughtful lyrics. Heather Horn of online blog Fuel Friends wrote this of the track. A really lovely song from modern Austin, Texas indie band Okkervil River with various images that evoke home. One of which is Otis Redding, "Home is where beds are made and butter is added to toast. I know that it's home because that's where the stereo sings." Then it kicks into the chorus, which masterfully blends in the Redding refrain, "I've got dreams, dreams to remember," which made me smile wide the first time I listened to it one night in bed in the dark. And finally, writing for KCRW, Marion Hodges authored an article titled, "Why Okkervil Rivers Listening to Otis Redding at Home During Christmas Might Be the Actual Best Christmas Song," in which she opined, "The odds of calling a Christmas song this relatively new my all-time favorite, might, let alone the one I will spend this essay arguing is actually the best Christmas song, seems pretty much impossible on paper. After all, few things connect so many of us to warm and fuzzy childhood memories than certain Christmas songs. Yet over the years, this one has bested all of my childhood favorite carols." We can start with a subtle structural nod that it makes to the actual Otis Redding song, "I've Got Dreams to Remember," that also lends the song its lyrical apex. It's a fine example of what Okkervil River's frontman Will Sheff can do when given permission to communicate with another artist over generations in his beloved folk music tradition. The song is built by lovingly taking apart Redding's track, which is not a Christmas song, but clearly tied to Christmas visits back home in the narrator's memory. Repurposing that song's major titular refrain, this guy tells a story that's heartbreaking in a completely different way, and in this case, so perfectly captures the thoughts, feelings, memories, and regrets that can flood your mind when you're home for Christmas, or as it's more eloquently expressed in the song, "to a room that's not mine, but it's just like I left it before." Somehow, the specificity of the story in the Okkervil River song makes that line feel deeply relatable. The thought of your own adult dreams and pursuits clashing against your childhood ones while you become ones will become amplified due to the song's perfectly captured feelings of how foreign your childhood home feels when you don't live there anymore, even if so many comforts still abound. There are no false steps in this song, not a word, instrument, breath, or pause that feels unnecessary or out of place. In fact, one of the most powerful moments comes in the instrumental break between the lines, "Your dad says you're living in Georgia since last September," and the, "Yeah? Well, I've got dreams to remember," which that was one of the parts you really underscored in your review as well. His story is your story. His dreams are your dreams. They are because they are not. His wanting of a quiet small town life with a high school sweetheart versus his resolve to remember what he's actually trying to do with his life probably isn't exactly the same as your own road not taken versus a recommitment to the life you chose story. But just try to listen to this song without whatever your versions of those things are flashing through your mind. Try making it through a holiday season on any given year without that strange swirl of love, comfort, reflection, disappointment, what ifs, and determined resolve to keep remembering and hopefully further realizing those dreams for at least one more year. Sorry, Linus and Jesus, but that's really what Christmas is all about. And I can't help but really relate to this. I did, especially like, because this came out in the early 2000s or whatever. And like, that was about the time I was graduating college and doing this weird, like, where I leave my place and then go to my parents' place where all my brothers convene and we sleep in our childhood beds and bedrooms. And the shit's just a little weird, but also nostalgic. And you get caught up remembering all the things that developed in real time when you lived in the confines of those walls and under that roof. So I find this wildly relatable, especially for probably anyone between, I don't know, 20 and 30 when they go back home. It just kind of, you know, it stirs up old shit, or at least it did for me, and it sounds like it did for this person who reviewed it and Chef the writer himself. So let's jump into these lyrics. Home is where beds are made and butter is added to toast. On a cold afternoon, you can float room to room like a ghost. Take the creche out and argue about who gets to set up the kings. And I know that it's home because that's where the stereo sings. I've got dreams, dreams to remember, but not even home will be with you forever. It's Christmas time and the plane flies me over white hills to a town in a dream where the sky is frozen and still. And a room that's not mine, but it's just like I left it before, with the wax from the candles all dusty and locks on the door, where I held you so tenderly, and where in summer I opened your letter to me. Now I'm standing where we kneeled, and a miracle mile now borders it. But if I turn my face to the field, I don't even notice it for a second. There's a tangle of greenery where winter scenery ends, and I hear that song sometimes and imagine us much more than friends. Like if we stayed in this town, bought the first house that went up for sale, and how each Christmas time would bring in-laws and snowy days and holiday mail. Your dad says you're living in Georgia since last September. Yeah, well, I've got dreams, dreams to remember. 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 Oh, Sarah, come back to New Hampshire. We'll stay there forever. So yeah, there you have it. It is kind of pathetic. You're right. I mean, at its base, like this idea, and I'm sure that at some point the listeners are going, "What the hell's wrong with you? You get yourself back into shape. What the fuck are you doing?" But yet I think certain times of year and certain settings really all form together to create this perfect storm of kind of grabbing you by the wrist and dragging you, sometimes begrudgingly, down memory lane. And I think Christmas is one of those quintessential times, especially when you visit home, wherever that is, because so many of us move out and go our separate ways, but for some reason we all come back to our parents' place where we often were reared, and that's where these things kind of flood our minds. And I think this is just a moment of probably a few drinks and an Otis Redding or song too deep into it, and it all came back to him about old Sarah. So go ahead, John.
Yes, there's a couple of things. When I say pathetic, I don't mean it in a judgmental
I
way.
know, yeah.
I mean it's in like you sort of sit around and you think, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" Time pathetic way. Um, are you familiar with the Otis Redding song?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thanks to my
again,
dad.
that's kind of pathetic in a different way because he sees her kissing another guy and he's just completely going to pieces.
Yeah.
And a great song. But yeah, the thing about the sort of so I was focusing on that really rather than the coming back home, and I was thinking of the home in this song as more like the feeling of nostalgia and memory which associates with this Sarah or whatever. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think no. Once I left home, I don't think I ever stayed at my parents' house for Christmas. In the old house that we lived in, I had my own place, and then after a couple of years, they moved to a new house, but all within sort of 10, 15 miles of each other. So we never stayed over. So the only time I did stay over is their house in France, which is a totally different place.
Right. Yeah, it's a whole other world. You don't have all this
Yeah.
like childhood tethered to the childhood memories, there.
I remember about 6, 8 months after I'd moved out, coming back to see my parents, and I went up to my bedroom, and it was a fucking study. Even though I already had a study downstairs, and that really pissed me off. And there's no reason because I was never going back to that room, but it still
Yeah.
pissed me off.
Yeah.
How fucking dare you?
That's great. Well,
mental.
I grew up in a house with 4 boys, so it was my parents' room and then 4 bedrooms, and you can't really have 4 studies. So one of them got changed into my stepmother's sewing room, and then all of them were and it was the brother who got married almost right out of high school. So they knew he was never coming back to sleep in his old bed. But the rest of us who went off to college and then dabbled in this and that. And one of our brothers was just a traveler, just a gypsy who go all over the place. all of our bedrooms were kind of preserved, like these old rooms in the Italian grandmother's house covered in plastic that can't be. So we would come back to that, and I would leave. Like I would come in there for Christmas Eve, do the dinner, do the one gift exchange until the next day, and I'd drive an hour back to Baltimore and then come back the next morning because I couldn't do it. Like it was so weird to sleep in like a double bed, that my feet damn near hung over the edge of, and fucking Beatles and Orioles posters on the wall, and I'm going, you're fucking 25. Get the hell out of here. You can just drive back tomorrow. So, and it was always much to my parents' chagrin, or like, oh, come on, stay, buddy. I'm like, I love you guys, but I'll be here for breakfast. I promise. So yeah. But that is a very, I don't know if it's like exclusive to America, but it's a very American trope, this home for the holidays thing where you pack up the car and the grandkids, or you come just after and you go back home.
You got bigger distances, haven't you? So
yeah,
it makes sense.
So it makes sense, right? Yeah. So I think this is a lovely example of that, and the kind of shit that can sometimes happen to you. So, hey man, I'm really glad that you enjoyed this track.
Yeah,
Okkervil is
really
always a pretty good listen. So
yeah,
awesome.
definitely.
Guys out there in the listening audience, please let us know what you thought of this track by Okkervil River. I'm really interested to see if there's any of the fellow Yanks out there that can relate to this much like I can. And please let us know your thoughts on it. If you have any other great Christmas songs that you guys like checking out during this time of year, we're always interested to hear what you all have to say. So drop your comments down in the comments field below. And also please like, share, and or subscribe if you haven't done any or all of those things. We really do appreciate it. It only takes a couple seconds of your time, so thanks so much. And hopefully John and I will catch all y'all in growing numbers on the next installment of the Audiophiles. Happy holidays, everybody.